So thanks for joining me, guys. Oh, that's where it goes. It's an interesting topic, context is king, and audiences ruling the castle. It is opposite of the way many of us grew up in the media landscape, and as the previous panel touched upon, maybe potentially a little creepy for consumers, and I think we're all struggling to figure that out. I would throw this out to anyone who's comfortable starting. How do brands need to change the way they think about consumers in a digital age?
I'll take a crack at that.
Yeah, good luck.
I think the issue of context, in particular for brands and who are trying to market and sell, which is ultimately the driver behind all the advertising that supports the media, is not so much context, but utility. And I guess the two can be sort of analogous to each other, but when you're trying to grab the attention of a consumer or distract the consumer to ingest your marketing message, it's not about where it's placed, it's actually whether or not it's useful and whether or not there's utility. And I think that the challenge for a lot of media brands is to figure out how do you actually begin to develop that relationship with the consumer to be actually useful.
I agree as well. I think what happened in the past 5-10 years in the way consumers consume is that providing value became way more important than it used to be. The web is almost half mobile, which means that we're consuming content and experiences from a very small screen. We don't have the same opportunity to display a picture a lot, many times and hope someone clicks on that. And I think brands are looking into new ways, new technologies where they can repurpose the same budgets they used to have, but in a new shape and form, looking for the same type of value they used to have or they still have in search marketing and even displays when it worked. So I think a lot of it is around value.
So it's interesting, I've often said that, I don't want to be a technology company. Frankly, everyone wants to be a technology company. I like airplanes, I would rather lease than own. It moves too quickly into depreciating asset as best as I can tell from my perspective. Larry, you have an interesting perspective in that as a traditional publisher, whatever that means now, you guys have really taken a leadership position in terms of content distribution across platforms. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the perspective as a media content company, right? What does this new paradigm mean for you and your partners?
Yeah, so there's a couple different layers here. The one is just as a content company and trying to reach our consumers as our own brand as opposed to our advertisers' brands. Our big change has been how to translate what the essence of USA Today is onto multiple platforms. And when I look at it, we've got roughly 18, 20 different editions of USA Today every day. We've got 2 or 3 different ones in print. We've got a national one that's in local papers, and an international one. We've got 5 on mobile when you count, iOS, Android, Microsoft, BlackBerry. I mean, they're all different presentations and in some ways, different audiences. And we have the same thing on tablet. We have the same thing on the web. We have multiple different things. And we have social media, which is one of the most complicated new editions of USA Today. We have a team that looks at social media like it is the publishing platform and looks at the totality of what we put out on social media as if that's their newspaper or that's their thing. So we're looking at the habits on each of those platforms and how they're changing and trying to serve them. And we'll have stories that will live 3, 4, 5 days on one platform and not at all on the others. I mean, it's really an interesting science to that. But on our advertising issue is a very different one. Advertisers used to just frequently buy our brand as an associative thing to how they want to sell what they're trying to sell.
Sure.
Our customers are the kind of customers they might have wanted. And what they're tied up in, for the most part, is much more of trying to reach somebody who they have reason to believe is more interested in their product than somebody who's less interested, the value of that reader. What I think, and I think that's, honestly, I definitely think that's a big part of the future. There's no question we have to do that. Buying an audience is the most important thing for an advertiser. But we're losing some key elements, I think, and we have to be careful about. One of them is the art of discovery, of what makes someone interested in a product that they don't know about. So I buy a shirt at Brooks Brothers Online, and the next 6 weeks, every site I go to sells me, is trying to sell me shirts on Brooks Brothers Online.
Yeah.
I mean, which is great, except I bought the shirt, you know, and I'm like looking for socks or something. But more importantly, I mean, I'm joking about that, but it's probably true algorithmically that I'm more likely to buy a shirt at Brooks Brothers Online than somebody who isn't. And that is thinking about the advertiser. It's not thinking about me. And I'm not seeing ads for things that I don't know I'm interested in. Oddly enough, the best medium I have for discovery today is still print. Even though digital is so much more efficient in lots of ways, it's very difficult for us to build units and positions in our digital media that will cause somebody to see something for the first time and say, wow. Look at that new Jaguar. Maybe I should start thinking about a new car. You know, that moment, that beginning of the purchase funnel, if that disappears, that's problematic for a lot of advertisers, particularly new products. If you look through our print product, it's not an accident that a huge percentage of the advertising is for something new.
Right.
New phones, new cars, new whatever.
It's interesting, you know, I think depending on how you look at the funnel, I mean, that's either right at the top of the funnel or right at the bottom of the funnel, probably the top. To either one of you gentlemen, how does technology help a content creation company like Larry's, like mine, to put themselves not just at the top of the funnel where ideas are seated, but provide that context and that in-media opportunity to work at the bottom end of the funnel just as seamlessly across whatever platform it might be?
So we've actually embarked on probably one of the more painful sort of transformations. About 2 or 3 years ago, we realized that there was this massive shift that was happening, and I feel like I've become sort of the old curmudgeon-y, angry digital guy. But having done this for now 18 years, what we've seen is that the monetization and the currency that the entire digital platform has been built on has been attention and impressions. And if you look at the sheer volume of impressions that are being generated by media and by all the blogs and media entities, it's overwhelming and it's outstripping demand. So we have begun this shift towards how do you really create value for the consumer as well as for our advertisers in mobile, and how do you do that as a true mobile first entity? And some of the things that we're looking at is figuring out not the inventory or the positioning, but how do you truly give the advertisers and the consumers exactly what they want. Now, we probably have a slightly unfair advantage because the people who are either planning a wedding or setting up their new homes or actually planning for a baby are very, very targeted and qualified consumers. But when we launched our app called The Lookbook, it had 20,000 wedding dresses in it. You can search on it by various different sizes and styles. It will point you to the local retailer that carries that design. And every one of those dresses and every image is essentially a paid ad. Mm-hmm. So without the advertising, I have a shell. I don't have any content for the consumers. The consumers want and are looking for and discovering the actual content, which is what my advertisers provide.
Yeah.
And so that's true context.
Yeah, as a niche vertical, I think you do have an advantage there. You know, I'm often fond of saying that I think branded content is only branded content if it sucks. If it's good, it's just content. And I think sites like yours, organizations like yours are proof of that. Inside of what you said, and maybe I'll throw this over to Adam, you mentioned that, you know, what advertisers and what consumers want. Maybe that's under the assumption, and it might very well be true inside of your world, that that's the same thing. What happens broadly, Adam? Is it the same thing? If it's not, how do you conjoin them? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think we are overwhelmed with information. I mean, doesn't it feel like the last year passed so much faster than 10 years ago? And think about yourself. There's so much stuff we could be doing. I think discovery has the chance to be very creepy if it doesn't work. And I think if I've been on a product page and suddenly that page is hunting me all around the web, you know, it's creepy when it's creepy. You know it's porn when you see it. And, you know, I think it's creepy if it's creepy. And I think on the other side of the spectrum, discovery can be amazing. And we know this experience when it works. When you open Pandora and there's a good song coming up and you enjoy it, you have a really emotional attachment to it and you love it. And from time to time you get that song, that Britney Spears song that you really don't like and you can't skip it anymore. You don't like that experience. So I think from brand perspective, the big question is what do we need to do as brands and I think even as publishers so users choose to involve us in their day-to-day experiences. So the good side of discovery. And I think for publishers, it's an opportunity to bring what they do really best, and that's create good content that brands can somehow partner with to bring relevant content where people want to interact with that. I think also, as opposed to traditional advertising, discovery and content or storytelling-driven advertising as a chance to really touch the full purchase funnel. A YouTube page can be top of the funnel awareness, make someone aware of a new product. But then an article in CNET that compares iPhone to Android could be more of a consideration phase that you can spark in a consumer, and all the way to something that can allow the consumer to eventually sign up or subscribe. So I think discovery is a chance to connect people with different points in the funnel based on what they care about. And we have a long way to make it amazing, but the potential, I think, is there.
Yeah, and I guess inside of that then is that the entirety of this business, or at least the advertising business, is built on then serving consumers something when they get there. Larry, I'll push this to you. The customer journey, the consumer journey on the interweb is a pretty fascinating thing, and it's certainly not what it was 5 years ago, and it's definitely not what it was when print reigned and TV reigned and radio reigned. So how do you serve ad units up to your consumers across the different mediums, and how do you do that in a way that makes your advertisers happy?
I mean, it's no different than how we serve content. Our content, really in today's world, when you look at how much of it's gone mobile, how much of our communication with our customers has gone mobile, you're sure that it's much more interactive, because that's the nature of mobile. It's in your hand. You're able to move around and go places. Part of what we do in the media world for our own content is become more personal, have more unique content, have a personality. We've gone to much higher number of voices, individual voices of our writers and of the people, so you know who you're getting a story from. Because what we're up against is the social world, where you're choosing to get those stories based on someone you know's decision. On Facebook, you're getting told about a story in the New York Times or the USA Today, and so you go to it. The percentage of people, the hardest thing for traditional media to understand is that their traditional way of presenting themselves, a front page mentality, whether it's really a front page in a newspaper or a television show with the lead in, that's for a huge percentage of people is gone. That we don't have that ability to just say, here's what's important today, here's the context. We do have the ability and we do it, but a large number of people don't choose to go that way to find it. They're looking at a feed. So we want to be part of that feed. We want to have a relationship with those consumers in a much different way, and have them get to know us, and us to be a more trusted source. We do have a role in being unbiased, or when you have questions like price comparison or product comparison rather, you do need trusted places you can go to that you believe don't have a vested interest in giving you one or the other. And so we do serve a role. That's a very primitive version of what we do in everything, whether it's politics or coverage of government. We don't try and tell you what to think. We try and help you decide what to think. And so we do have a real role there. When you're in that mindset and thinking that way, and it requires you to do that, to stop and think about something. One of the dangers of media today is a lot of it comes from a point of view. And what that does for people is it prevents them from having to think. So if there's a new Supreme Court justice named tomorrow, somebody will go to Fox and say, oh, they like him, I do, or I don't. And rather than look at his decisions, decide for yourself, do I like him or not? But when people are in the mode of actually learning and deciding, it isn't a bad time for an advertiser to be in front of them with an interesting new product either. So there's psychological elements to this too. But we do, as a media company, our partnerships with advertisers are more important. Advertising, no matter what anybody else tells you, is content. And so you have the same issues we do in what do they want to read. And it goes to your point of good content is good advertising is content, bad advertising is advertising, right? So I think we're all part of telling that story together. We're learning how to tell stories on multiple platforms and in new ways. Both of us are, advertisers and media companies. So it's an interesting time.
Can I just add to that? I mean, I think that's a great point. I think what's horrifying about the situation is that it's actually expensive to create good content.
Yeah.
and you're not getting paid for those impressions.
Tell me about it.
And I think that, you know, the challenge is, it's like, you know, you have all these people who are doing great content, and I pulled this up just to sort of get an idea of what was quote unquote trending, because the editorial context that people provide is gone. So I won't mention the site, but you can imagine who it is, but you know, everyone knows that you put a number and headline to get someone to click on it, right? So above the fold on my phone, 21 Wikipedia pages that will make it impossible for you to sleep. Renee Zellweger's awesome response to trolls over appearance. Weird things couples do when they're sick. And this is a site that's proposing to be news. I mean, there's something about the Ukraine below the fold, but it's all about clickbait and trying to get our impressions. And when you think about this, it's like the programmatic buying is existing because there's so much supply on impressions. When Facebook sells a CPM for 15 cents, when Tumblr's got 5 billion monthly impressions, and Marissa's proudly saying they're going to do 100 million in revenue next year, our attention is worth very little anymore. And I think the challenge is for the entities who are trying to create quality content and monetize at a higher rate, that party's over. If you cannot create relevance and utility and actually engage the advertiser and the consumer at the same time, I'm not sure there is a future in what they call traditional digital media.
All right, well, I don't think it's fair for you to pick on the New Yorker. It's an interesting topic, right? I mean, you know, I think individually everyone in this room would stand up and shout from the rafters that great content needs to find a home and needs to find a place. Do clients care? Do agencies care? Individually, collectively, when the spreadsheet needs to add up to a appropriate space on the right-hand side, maybe less so. So what I'm sort of fascinated by what you're both sort of saying is that, yeah, context is king is the title of this panel, but content is probably still king, but it depends on the context, right? And I'd love to know from you, Adam, I think you might be most closely associated to this sort of conversation, and from the technological side, how do you help maintain the uniqueness, the in some instances preciousness and value of content, while you're also disseminating it out to a web of consumers who may care less, and to a smaller web of clients who decidedly seem to care less in the way that they vote with their dollars?
I'm optimistic. I think this is an amazing time to be a publisher, because I think that there's so many technologies and platforms out there that if you have the culture to participate and try different things and find those companies that can help you achieve whatever you're looking to achieve, there's a lot of stuff out there that publishers can now use. I think content is king, but only if there's a kingdom. And kingdom today is an audience, and in a world where social becomes 30% of publishers' traffic, you have to ask yourself, how do we get part of that distribution discussion and get our stories in front of massive audiences? And I'm optimistic because I think that if publishers are open to test titles and while trying to still preserve editorial voice, they'll increase click-through rates and find more people that will try it out. And if publishers are open to A/B test different web designs and pages based on where the person came from, then they'll get more engagement and probably more revenue in pages per session and all the great KPIs publishers are looking for. I think a lot of it is culture. You have to be open-minded to a new generation that cares about 5 reasons 4. And I think you also have to maintain sort of a voice, because you are who you are and you shouldn't change that. But I think there's a middle ground. We get now some stories that we're able to present on a monthly basis in front of 40, 50 million people. Massive, massive audiences, and because it's a combination of really good content and publishers that are testing 5, 6, 7, 10, 8, titles, so that some people would enjoy that story if they came through 5 reasons why you would think your mother is really good friends with your father, and other pockets of audiences will come to the same story, and the story will be family matters, read about what we think. And it's the same story, and I think just a simple example, but I think it's a good time to be a publisher. I think it's a good time to find Kingdom, which is the audience that look for your content. And I think same goes in terms of opportunity for brands that are utilizing those platforms and partnering with those great publishers to reach audiences that are looking for those stories.
And I think I agree completely with that. I mean, I think some of it we do because there is still a human aspect to some of this, to content creation and to telling a story differently and better. We partner with with Taboola and do a lot of work with them, and they represent a technology advantage that we also want to make use of, and I think we'll continue to do things like that. It's a constant and changing mix, but it's still, in the end, great content is defined by the audiences, by them. It isn't just clickbait or things that send you to them. Clickbait, it's kind of like the dinner you had that you're hungry an hour later too. After a while, you can't live on a steady diet of it, and so we do want it. We have to produce content that's relevant to people, and what makes it relevant is either the utility of what they can do with it. Oh, I can choose what car to buy or what credit card to use, or the utility of how it helps them in their daily lives. I want to be smart. I want to go to lunch with people, and I want to know as much about the topic as they do, or I want to succeed at work or do whatever it is. So there are lots of different elements here, and we have to do them all. And science can help in some of them. Technology can help in a lot of them. But there's still, we're still, as an entity, as a media company, we present a personality, and we present something that we believe is just like you having a friend who's telling you something and knowing something about them and what you trust them for and what you don't.
So Adam mentioned KPIs, right? And if there are any traditional publishers in the room, they probably winced a little bit when they heard that, and you start to wonder and maybe even get nervous. Well, what KPIs do you mean, Mr. Advertiser? I would throw it out to you guys. What are the right KPIs to pay attention to? And do we have a universal agreement that we're going down the right path with that?
No, I mean, playing the role of the angry curmudgeon-y digital guy, I would
Working
say
so far.
everything they just said is about still chasing the impression, and my argument is the impression is worthless now. Or it is rapidly getting to zero. And what you're finding is, and what's the innovation? It's Red Bull, who is a energy drink, creating content and becoming its own distribution, becoming its own production house, and becoming its own branded content company. Read the S1 for GoPro, a camera, they call themselves a media company because they believe that the facility that they're providing and creating the content for is something that this one demo is going to be able to create. Context is actually going to go away because everyone just wants to get into the content business and become the end product that the consumer wants. And so, the question is—
Does that mean the consumer is going to accept just getting all their content from those people?
I think they'll get a very
all.
specific segment from them. Yeah, I mean, I think what will wind up happening is if the consumer's not willing to pay for it, I think that content's going to go away. I think to try to sell an adjacency or to try to sell some kind of placement that provides context, that is a dying opportunity online. I don't think it exists on mobile. No one clicks on a banner that's the size of a piece of Trident gum. I think it's really difficult to be able to provide that. Look at what has happened with Google in their last earnings announcement. They missed the mobile thing terribly, and it's going to start impacting their business. And I just feel like the mobile device is a completely different media platform that we're all consuming from, but advertising doesn't belong there, and it's going to be very difficult to try to shoehorn that in. It's just a different beast. And I think what we will do is we will buy TV shows and we will consume the TV shows. TV shows that used to be subsidized by advertising on the larger screen is now going to be paid for on the smaller screen. And once those producers and channels start selling directly to the consumer, they have no interest in generating more eyeballs and impressions because that's going to be the less efficient way of actually just distribution.
So are we moving towards a time-based model, an attention-based model?
I think subscriptions, I think a la carte purchases, I think we're all going to have to learn to become consumer packaged goods people because it's the relationship with the consumer is going to be primary. The consumer is still king of the castle, but I think content and context, that's all getting obliterated because attention is just not worth anything anymore. The value of the impression, the KPI, that we can sit there and say, what's our funnel analysis? What's the click-through rates? What's the page view impressions? There's not a single person who's running a media company who's not looking at their server logs in horror at the increase of impressions generated from the iPhones and Android devices and iPads, because those are just not monetizable.
I'm not sure how much time we have to push back, so I'll be very quick.
We have a minute 28.
Yeah. So I just think a few things. One, I think I think a lot of what you say is true, and we see it, and it's a real concern for the industry. But again, seeing the interesting part of what's that this transition, companies like American Express, used to spend a lot of money showing you a picture of a credit card with the hope that you'll click on that and become a client. And now they have open forum that provides to small businesses in the country tips about how to manage cash flow and things of that nature. Eventually, Amex says that people end up signing up. I got to know Louis C.K. and paid a lot of money for whatever he says, even going to his show, because TechCrunch wrote an article about Louis C.K. and there was a link to it. I think that it's in the end the main KPI is value. Value could be subscription, could be sign up to a newsletter if it's a publisher you want to reach out to those consumers afterwards. I'm optimistic about monetization as well, even with advertising. I think that we're seeing this storytelling type advertising to generate exciting CPMs. But in the end, I think that if you focus on value, then a lot of page views and a lot of audience worth a lot because you have the attention of people on your site. And now it's a matter of can you provide value to those audiences. If all you're going to do is show a display banner 1,000 times, I think you're going down. But I think if you're trying to sign up those consumers to then tell them stories, if you're trying to link to products that they may like, if you focus on ROI, then I think there's a lot of potential there. And we see now people that work with us that spend over $10 million a year in storytelling advertising and eventually measuring us like they used to measure search, subscription, lifetime value, cost per acquisition, stuff like that.
I think that's a great place to end, and maybe we'll just end on the sentiment, which is the question that we started with, that brands certainly need to change the way they think about reaching consumers in a digital age, and this is a great way to highlight it. So thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you.